everyone. My name is Allicia Tsolis. I'm the Executive General Manager of Personal Injury Claims at Suncorp. And I'm absolutely delighted to be talking about something that resonates very deeply with me, and that's all things capability in personal injury claims management. In an era where unforeseen accidents and incidents can really occur in a split moment, the ability to effectively manage and navigate the complex landscape of personal injury claims is a skill that really does carry immense significance. It's more than a buzzword, and personal injury claims management is not merely a procedural exercise. I think it's a dynamic process between a delicate balance of compassion, expertise, and efficiency. So, with that said, I would like to introduce today's wonderful panel. With a wealth of experience and expertise, I have absolutely no doubt that they will all bring a very unique perspective that promises to enrich today's discussion. So we'll start with Roger Arnold. Roger is from WorkSafe Victoria. He is WorkSafe Victoria's Executive Director of Insurance, responsible for overseeing the Workers' Compensation Scheme, incorporating services for employees and injured workers, as well as premium and self-insurance oversight. Hello, Roger. We have Nadiene. We'll go in the other order, sorry. Our next panel member is Amanda Malu. Amanda joined ACC in September 2022, bringing a wealth of experience in service design and delivery. Prior to ACC, Amanda was the Chief Executive of Whānau Awhina. Did I say that right? It goes with my daddy being a Maori, my son's dad being Maori, so I asked him before I came here today. So Whānau Awhina Plunkett, the largest personal provider of support services to families with young children in New Zealand. Welcome. Then we have, we're in a different order here, Nadiene van Gorp. Nadiene van Gorp is an experienced professional specialising in learning and development and human resources with over 15 years of expertise in talent, performance management and behavioural capabilities. She has played a pivotal role in helping organisations identify and harness their employees' full potential. Welcome. Kylie Oliver is from Allianz. Kylie is a senior people and culture expert at Allianz, supporting the personal injury division to develop and embed robust people strategies to attract, retain and build the capability of personal injury professionals whilst building a positive employee experience and workplace culture. She has extensive technical and practical experience across multiple HR disciplines and commercial operations, both locally and international. Welcome. And last but certainly not least, we have Jayne Gowland from Return to Work SA. Welcome, Jayne. As Senior Advisor, Capability and Return to Work SA Insurance Team, Jayne is a strong advocate for the broad scope of career opportunities within our industry. She has enjoyed collaborating across sectors locally and nationally to help build industry capability through roles in education, accreditation, human resources, injury management and vocational rehabilitation and legislative reform. Welcome to all our members today. So I believe, I've worked with Suncorp almost 25 years. I've led personal injury since about 2013. And I think people are our biggest asset. We cannot understate the value of our people. Their jobs are really tough, and when we're bringing them into our organisation, it's usually frontline, and we're asking them to be everything. So I think, capability is something that is a really important topic. So Roger, I'll start with you. With that said, you've got extensive strategic and commercial experience. What do you see as the most pressing capability gaps are across our industry?
Thanks. Can I begin? I'm going to do a little capability demonstration. I'm going to just stand up and demonstrate a capability for everyone, so just have a watch. So that's a capability, it's not one of humankind's greater capabilities, and it's never returned anyone to work. But for me, the point of that is capabilities are skills, experiences, mindsets, things we want to give our colleagues to achieve the great outcome gaps. and my background is I'm a kind of a finance and accounting sort of a guy, and so I'm always looking at the outcomes, and working in this industry is fabulous because getting someone recovered, healthy, back to work gets great financial outcomes. It's the only business I've worked in my career where we haven't been trying to get more money off the customers. And that really brings me to work each day. So when I think about capability gaps, Allicia, I think about what are the gaps that we are struggling to achieve. And I'm going to just pop 3 on the table and then hand over. Capability gap 1 does come out of the prior panel. It's about dealing with workers with a mental injury. And for any of us who have dealt, whether it's with friends or colleagues, and trying to work through for someone to give them good advice, to work with someone who your kind of evidence and outcome-based logical way of working through things just might not be aligned with where they're thinking. And so my number 1 capability gap for the industry to achieve the return to work would be better equipping our people to deal with someone going through a mental injury, but and it could also be dealing with people who are neurodiverse or other challenges, or from communities who are overrepresented with mental injuries. I reckon the second capability gap goes back to something again that Dr. Mary Wyatt said yesterday about our systems approach, and it's about how do you develop trust with an injured worker who's already had a really bad experience. I mean, let's face it, they're not talking to you because they want to be here. They've already had a bad experience. They've had to fill in a claims form. It's difficult, it's complex. How do you develop trust and get to understand that person-centred, biopsychosocial, holistic? How do we do that? And we've got quite often young people dealing with pretty embittered people in real trouble, and they've also got this massive list of tasks to do. So again, next capability for me would be, and maybe we do that with AI as our best friend, as that presentation from KPMG showed this morning. Maybe we build the capability with a toolkit of AI. And the third one, which I'm really, really passionate about, because ultimately our business is our people, is we do expose our people to continued difficult circumstances, continued vicarious trauma, and we see really good people in this industry burning out after a short period of time. You know, we see people who only survive weeks when they come in and join. So how do we build capability around mental welfare, coping techniques, debriefing techniques, ways that these really good people can stay with us in our organisations and remain trauma-free. And then the one final point I'd also make then is New South Wales and iCare have built this beautiful holistic capability framework with very many skill sets. Let's also remember that we don't have to deliver it all in one go immediately. If we deliver all of it, we'll improve enormously. But I think we can build capability a bit at a time and a bit here and a bit there, because each additional capability someone has means they do their job just a little better. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. It's interesting, the AI subject has been woven through the last 2 days, and it's a really interesting topic because, you know, at Suncorp we're trying to explore in terms of capability and our frameworks. How do we prepare our people to enable AI to complement their ability to manage claims? And it's not an easy task. I recently had my entire leadership team together in Queensland, and we did a persona test of what the future of a claims advisor looks like in 15 years' time. And I tell you what, there was some very different, I've got a very diverse team, some very different thinking. And the one thread that came through is how do we get our people ready for the future of technology? So yeah, really, really interesting topic. Thank you, Roger. Nadiene, we'll move over to you. So your role at WorkCover Queensland, you've got expertise in learning and development and also with human resources. What do you see as the most pressing capability gap in the industry? And how does your company stay up to date with the evolving skill needs of personal injury professionals?
Thanks. That's quite a few questions to answer. Good that Roger went first, so he's given you 3. And that was really, if I'd have set up a polling tool, where I was about to go was to say to people, how many skills do you think there are that our people in the claims roles need? So if I ask that question out now, old school, hands in the air or standing up, who thinks there is one skill that people need? Who thinks there's 5 or around 5? 10? 20? Oh, anyone upwards from 20? Still going. Heaps. There's certainly pressing gaps, and I think Mary Wyatt, you're famous all around today because I'm going to reference you as well, which is that yesterday you talked to the need for short-term imperatives, but the need for that future thinking, and that's really the space where we're at with capability. So as an L&D manager, every day I think I probably get about 20 emails that tell me about the top 5 skills needed for the future of work, the top 6 skills needed for the future of work, the top 7. At one point I started collating these all into a list, and that list got huge. Where do you even start? So we've hit that space at WorkCover at the moment for lots of reasons, contextual and externally. So we've just come through COVID, work's changed for our people. Our approach to people-centred learning is really about understanding our people, understanding the skills, and then focusing on the learning. So what we've just started to do was to put together our list of skills or our capabilities, and we've found that there are quite a lot, and we're looking at that with a new lens and a current lens, so with a short-term imperative, but with setting up that foundation so that we can have a future focus. So what we've done is we have done some work with PIEF. So that's our industry connection, and PIEF's connected us certainly to some of you on the stage who I'm with now in our networks to talk about industry-wide, what are we doing, so that we've got that internal lens, but we're also outward looking as well. So what we've done in just weeks really is rebuilt our list of critical skills for our claims roles, and we've hit 16. Which is a lot. And what we did with that straight away was to go out and do a quick and dirty baseline assessment to work out which one of these is the most critical. So what we were hoping that would come back is one, and we can start there and have a look. But we didn't actually get any kind of consistent theme that there was one critical skill for everybody. It was really different across the board. So what we're looking at with that 16 is that there are gaps for everybody everywhere. So for us, it's really about what do we do next? What's our approach to building that? Which brings me to my next piece, which is the how. How do we do this? How do we look at our learning? How do we bring it all together? So we're trying to take stock of what we currently have and have a real future focus in that space. One thing we do know about developing these capabilities, and I think that's probably the next piece which is really critical, is that when people used to be in the office, they used to learn a lot from the people next to them. They didn't learn from that 12-week classroom-based onboarding that we had in the 1990s, and some of us still have elements of it. That's not where they did most of their learning. They learnt when they sat out there next to somebody and they listened to a conversation and they heard what that person was doing well and they had someone reinforcing it. So we're trying to look at how do we replicate that now so that we can have that social learning for people. If you're an L&D person, we took this concept of 70-20-10, which is 10% structured learning, 20% learning from others, and 70% on the job. So what's critical for us with skills going forward is how we build those opportunities for people. So that's the focus of where we're at for now.
Just while we're on to you, a bit of a change of pace, just given you've got HR background as well. One thing we see a lot in our organisation through people's surveys is career progression, career pathways. What does the future look like for me? How are you going to get me there? How do you view that, and have you integrated that into your capability programs?
So career progression for us at the moment, again, it's a really individual thing. I got asked this question recently and get asked it all the time. We have a fairly flat structure for people, but what we're hearing from people, and particularly that next gen coming in, is that it is all about skills, and that's one of the things for us to look at in skills, is this piece around credentialing and what skills people can take forward in their careers. We know that they may not want to be in the role or even working for us forever, but I think what we need to be ready for is to be ready to take them back when they want to come back. And I know some of my other panel members are going to talk to culture and strategy, and culture is what will bring people back. But we want them to grow their careers, and we want them to have transferable skills that they can take across the organisation. So from a careers perspective, it's an ongoing challenge for us with all of these individual needs, and it is a very individual space.
Thank you. Kylie, let's move on to you. So working at Allianz, you're a senior people and culture executive. Can you give us a little bit of detail, provide us your insights on how the external environment is impacting on the critical skill requirements and development of personal injury professionals?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all, everyone knows that, it's driven by regulatory change and changes in law and legislation related to personal injury, and how that can affect straight up the impacting the critical skills that we require for our people to have. But we're also seeing injuries and risk emerging too, and there's some environmental factors that affect that, and we've spoken a lot about today in the previous panel, the rise in psychological claims. And you mentioned a great point when you opened, and I'd like to probably just share a bit of a personal journey, which I linked when you mentioned our, injury can happen in a split second, and that in particular, how does that impact people's lives? Well, 4 weeks ago, at my son's rugby union match, a little boy, Alfie, who was 5, got ran over by a car at Collaroy in the rugby union car park, in the car park of the rugby game, and he died. So life does change in a split second, and that changes for that family, but his friends that were around him on that day, the doctors who were there on site that were actually watching the games, that actually helped try to bring that little boy Alfie back to life on that moment. And in particular for me, that connection then for personal injury and the people that work here at Allianz, and in particular for me, it was that, wow, I picked up the phone and I rang Krista, who heads up our CTP claims, and I said straight away, can you find out, was that driver of that vehicle, do they have a policy with us, and how can we assist and create hypercare? And that went into triage quite quickly. And that's the privilege of working in an insurance agent and working in personal injury, where you can make that happen. But for me, what was really pleasing about capability and trusting capability in personal injury with this story was, she said, no, it's not Allianz, but I picked up the phone and I've rang my colleague at GIO, who that vehicle is registered with, and trust that capability, they'll look after that family. So for me, that psychological claim risk and dealing with injuries that can happen in a split second is really important. And we are seeing a shift in mental health, but in particular also that's driving it for me is the diverse customer expectations and the vulnerable customers in which we're supporting, and how does that shift the capability requirements of our people on the front line. And we also, in particular, lots of talk about AI and the great efficiencies that can bring for us. We are entering what the World Economic Forum is calling the fourth revolution, industrial revolution, when it comes to intelligence, data intelligence. And there's going to be a shift, in particular, how do we build those technological skills to drive and take out the tasks that actually take away that human-centred approach, but then shift, look at talent segments. What are talent segments we can shift to greater data intelligence? But then how do we reinvest that into the complex claims talent segments that are really going to make a difference in how we connect with people in the most vulnerable times to make that claims journey in moments that matter. That's really important for me, and I'm seeing that shift come through. We're also seeing shifts in particular I'm seeing, working with Julie and her leadership team, the ability and strategic thinking of our leaders and to think up and out is going to be really important, and how do we build that from a leadership capability come through. And also, for me, building commercial and business acumen is critical, and that's from a leadership capability point of view. But we're also seeing, as we develop technology in those skills in AI, we're going to see a shift, that data-driven, the ability to take that data and draw the insights and read that data is going to be a strong capability shift we need to see happen across our teams. But then not taking away the importance of the human-centred approach, the emotional intelligence and the ability to lead with empathy. And from the case manager, I think the panel just before just mentioned, it's a really tough job. And I think working with people is tough, but wow, those case managers on the phone, working with vicarious claims, and we see physical injury morph into psychological injury, that is a tough job. So how do we wrap our arms around those individuals? And I think there's a real gap today that, you know, we are trying to build our leadership capability, and it really pleases me as a HR professional working with Julie and her LT, really developing skills, and I call them, you know, that we can work on how do we build emotional intelligence and resilience in our entry-level roles that they can then take away as they're dealing with those really difficult conversations day in and day out. What support are we offering? But also, how are we building individuals' toolkits on their own resilience? So what are we offering that's actually, they can actually go away? And I spoke at a mental health panel recently about men's mental health. And I just met our CTP team here in SA when I came down. It was so pleasing to hear. They were listening to a panel, and I think learning comes from podcasts, it comes from different forums of learning. It's not just on job, there's all different things, and Nadiene, you spoke about that in particular. But for me, it's finding the joy in what we do, and I call it joy snacking. I'm a big fan of joy snacking. But also too, when it comes to building capability, small skill snacks is really important for our people as well.
Yeah. Devastating story, and thanks for sharing that with us. I think for me that sent absolute tingles through my spine. You have to be a really special individual to work in personal injury, and I genuinely believe that, and I think you're remarkable to pick up the phone and see how you could help. And, you know, in that moment, what resonated with me is it doesn't matter if that person was with Allianz or not, or with GAO, despite us being competitors, we're sitting there going, we just need to help that individual. And I think with large corporations, we have a social responsibility to do so. So thanks for sharing your thoughts on that, Kylie. Jayne, moving on to you, you're a very strong advocate for the broad scope of career opportunities within our industry. And it seems that most organisations talk a lot about critical building capabilities, yet we seem to have different definitions of what it means and what capability is. So how do you define it, and how do you measure it within your organisation? And I would love for you to share your personal story, because you've got an excellent example of how you have applied capability and really focused with your frontline people and more broader cultural shifts to deliver really good business outcomes.
Thank you, and I'd love to say that it's me. If there's anything I've learned about capability, it's never just the one. It's never the one person. It's never the one project, or there's no one answer to this. And if we've had beautiful highlights of that over the last day and a half, it's the collective, isn't it, that genuinely makes a difference in building capability. And I think for me, when we first start talking about capability, we focus on the people, which is where it should be. We talk about the attraction, the retention, the good training programs and the supports and the ongoing development and how we map through those career pathways. But what we've come to understand a little bit better as we've worked through this space ourselves at Return to Work Insurance particularly, and working so closely, and as part of the solution too, so closely with the two agents who have the expertise in delivering that claims management model that we have shaped, and that's both with EML and Gallagher Bassett. Closer, sorry, it's not, yes, the people piece is important, but it's all of those systems that we keep hearing about. It's the systems that support them, the tech, the AI that we're talking about. Further to that, it's challenging ourselves on the good intentions I think that we often have. We, in good governance, we are there to put safeguards in place. We are there to make sure that the intentions of the legislation of the scheme land as they're intended. And we sometimes put such strong safeguards around that, and especially in good governance, we want to hold tight to those, and it sometimes inhibits rather than enables the very things that we are trying to deliver. And it's trying to find that we all acknowledge those tension points, and I think the really good stuff comes out of exploring that together, in going right to the front line. Instead of remembering our recall of it, whether it was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago, go back, check and measure. And it's one thing I think we potentially fail. We do something great, we land great results, and I'm happy to share one of those processes we've just recently been through. But it's the going back, and we sort of go, oh, we made it, we tick the box, and we move on to something else without going back and going, is it still relevant? Is it still current? We put those safeguards in place, we put that incredible training program in place, all those resources in place. Are they still current? Do they still fit? Do we need to move it on? Do we need to do something better and unpack some of that stuff now because it's no longer relevant? So yes, I've had the privilege of working across with the CTP, gosh, there's some flashbacks. I'm seeing some faces in the crowd, across workers' comp insurance within South Australia.
We'll take you on the CTP team, Jayne. You're welcome to come across.
We're all one industry. I see our industry as one. It's, we've got to stop this compartmentalising it. And I think that's another great thing that comes out of this is that collaboration. What's happening in one is got such relevance across all, and I think that's where we can gain so much more from sharing. But one of the issues that we faced, and let's talk about as the issue that we faced first of all at Return to Work SA, was a couple of years ago, our return to work performance, our rates, were dropping considerably. It wasn't where we needed to be, and it certainly wasn't looking like it was turning around, despite great efforts by lots of people on multiple levels. And I think again, there's that lovely general word, it's capability, and it must be sitting at the front line. It must be sitting around those MCMs. And maybe we need to train more. Maybe we need to look at the tools they've got. Maybe we need to do more. And it gave us a chance to stop and reflect. And I think rather than telling you more about the what we did, what we've learnt over the last 2 years is it was the how that really mattered. And Declan speaks to it, and this really comes down to who's identified these three elements. And it's across his 3 Cs, we're calling them Declan's 3 Cs, and it's across the cultural piece that we had to go through. It was the capacity. And when we talk about capability, we often miss that capacity piece. It's been brought out a few times, but the impact of that as we move forward, as well as the competency, and then how those together then build that capability. So the challenge we had was that in return to work performance, when we first pulled those initial data, we had over 50% turnover in our MCM roles in that last couple of years. And I mean, if you think here across the room, half of us at the next PIEF conference next year will be gone or have changed roles, and less than half of the half that had left had stayed in the industry, which again, that's speaking volumes. And further to that, the average tenure of the case managers that were working with us was down to around 12 months. Okay, so you think about what we were able to deliver when we were in those roles at 1 year versus those great rich learnings that come out of that. So this is where we started on that culture piece, and it was certainly challenged by one of the principles that Michael, our CE, had introduced to us, which was this concept of promility. And it's a blended word of pride and assurance in what we were doing, pride in what we were doing as leaders at Return to Work SA, what our roles, our responsibilities were in managing those safeguards, but the humility to go back and question, the humility to going, hey, have we got it right? What makes us think that we know what's right? Why don't we go out and expand our thoughts, go and look to the expertise that exists around us? Excuse me. And that's what we did. And we were so I think about those first meetings that we went into coming new into the scheme, and where you would sit with case managers, with leaders, and we would ask these open questions, and you can see the fear of going, I want to tell you the answer, but I'm fearful of what that might mean, because I want to do the right thing by you. I want to be able to say it's not a problem. I want to say that we've got things in order, because I'm scared that if we don't do that, that you will come back and give us another answer. So it was around that openness. We had to earn that trust back. We had to show that we didn't get it right. We had to question ourselves and be open in that. And I think that together brought a more collegiality around the solutions that we saw. Further to that, gosh, I'm going to go and I'm not noticing this time flying by, more around the capacity piece. As we came to the solutions, we had to think about the capacity that came with that. We had, again, well-informed, good-intentioned reviews of the contract, in our contract management strategy, in our funding models, had taken out some of that funding based on what we had learnt and what we knew about the legislative reform. But we then didn't listen to what was happening and changing on that front line. And as a result of those funding changes, a lot of those key support roles were stripped out. We took away a lot of those other supporting roles. And so what happened is we then had one person in L&D. We might have had a team leader who was doing compliance and supporting induction and doing a whole lot of other things. We then had case managers who were coming in, or new team members coming in, and that induction experience, despite the good intentions, it didn't deliver as they needed to. And not only were they trying to do that, but they had 3 other vacancies next to them, and they had picked up a caseload of not only 50 or 60, or then it was also covering those other portfolios. And so then as a new person would come in, those portfolios, this stuff, if you've worked in this area, these are the challenges that we had to listen and hear. And then we had to sit and listen to what the solutions were, not what we thought they were, not, hey, we've got another toolbox and we've got more things to do, to do it. And you see again that startled look going, I can't even open the toolbox. I can't even open my computer because I've still got 7 messages to answer from yesterday. The message that comes through again today from across the board is we came into this industry, most of us, to make a difference. We want to be able to have the chance. The job satisfaction comes from that chance to make the difference. And I think that's where we connect to. And whether it's in our roles now in putting a great AR or a tech solution in place, or in being able to support a team member going through some of those challenges, that is what connects us together. And finding the capacity and the room to do that is where I think some of the endurance and that tenure really does make a change. The last one is around the competency. Only then, once we've got some of that capacity, once we have got that openness, that trust, that culture of openness, then I think we really can get into the nuts and bolts of building that competency. We've got people staying in those roles longer. We've got that network of support around people to mentor, to show, to lead us through that stuff. And I think that's where the gold really comes. And so many other people have spoken to it so much more articulately than I can today. And so I think that's that collaboration piece overall that keeps coming up. The sooner we can have an overarching view of all of those little key bits, being able to identify across schemes, across organisations, to build a solution around, for us it was around this mobile case management and those return to work results. When we had that overarching results, we could start tracking and viewing and sharing those results and seeing where the gaps were, and then starting to put risk mitigations around those. We could actually talk more specifically to them. So as a result of that, 2 years later, I'm really proud of the collective work that I get to speak to today, because it had nothing to do with me. It was the delivery of the frontline workers and everybody else around them who have turned those return to work rate results around to 92% at 13 weeks and over 94% now at 26 weeks. We have got an uplift in employee engagement rates. We have had a 35% increase to help that capacity around the claims managers that are out there, and their portfolio numbers have dropped significantly. They were up at around 40, they are down at 27, which gives people the chance to have those meaningful conversations. We've had a 50% reduction in the turnover. And there's so much, again, this is one of those moments we can go, great, we've nailed it, let's pack up and go. But there's anything about this industry, it's never static state, which is what I love about it. That growth, that opportunity, those career is just exciting. So, again, huge thanks to everybody for all the schemes we got to lean in, for all of the openness between GB and EML, the openness going, hey, we've worked out it this way, and that sharing of knowledge. That's the stuff that makes a difference.
Thanks for sharing, Jayne. I'm sure it clearly had a lot to do with you. So thanks for sharing your story. Amanda, you have joined us all the way from New Zealand. So you bring to us a wealth of experience in service design and delivery. And working with the ACC, the Service Delivery Group, it provides critical customer-facing support services for injured people. So, with an international lens, we'd love to hear from you and hear from your organisation. I understand you've recently embarked on a transformative program, and just trying to get the links between what you have found, what's worked well, what hasn't, particularly around capability. So, if you could share that with us, that would be fantastic.
Kia ora, Allicia. Tēnā koutou katoa. Kei te mara whenua o te rohi nei. Ko kauna ngā iwi. Ake mihi ana e mihi ana e mihi ana. Kia ora, everyone. Less than 1 year into ACC, it feels a little odd to be sitting up here and speaking about such a topical issue as capability. And I guess, unlike many of my esteemed colleagues on the stage here, probably the biggest capability issue facing ACC is cultural capability. And this is something we are focusing on very closely, and to the point that we have recently released a very new, hot off the press 10-year strategy, which really forces the organisation to think about the capability of our people to deliver on that strategy. And if I could just ask for someone to put the slide up, I think you got a sneak peek of this yesterday. So our 10-year strategy is very deliberately framed in what we're calling a two-world view. And so those of you who have any comprehension of New Zealand history, you'll know we have a foundational document called Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi, which is the nearest thing we have to a constitution. ACC is a Crown agency, so we have obligations under the treaty as an agency of the Crown. So our strategy has been developed, and I can't really take a lot of credit for it because, of course, it was under development before I came to ACC, but it has been framed very deliberately in Te Ao Māori, so in the tangata whenua, the people of the land, one treaty partner, and tangata te tiriti, the rest of New Zealand. And it's quite a bold and ambitious 10-year strategy, and I'm not going to get into all of the detail of it, but I thought what you might be interested in hearing a little bit about today is this dual framing and the metaphor we've used, which is the metaphor of a double-hulled waka, or a double-hulled voyaging canoe. And each hull of the waka represents either side of the treaty partnership. So on one side you have tangata whenua, Māori of New Zealand and iwi of New Zealand, and on the other side you have tangata tiriti, the other treaty partners, and that is the rest of New Zealand. And so there's been a lot of conversations about diversity, equity, belonging. I've heard people reference needing to focus on Indigenous people and their access to your various supports and schemes. The same things are present for us in New Zealand, except that the right for Māori is enshrined in our constitution and our law in the Treaty of Waitangi. And so ACC has framed our strategy in both worlds very, very deliberately to represent that while we are focused on equity and building capability amongst our staff to deliver on our aims for equity, we are also aiming for something we call mana taurite, which is what it means for Māori to live as Māori in New Zealand and to access the supports and the services, and in our case the rehabilitation or the weekly compensation that they are entitled to as a treaty partner. And access is a really big thing for us in New Zealand. So we know Māori are twice as likely to get injured as non-Māori and are far less likely to access ACC. So we've got a lot of work to do to build the capability of our people to be able to respond in the right ways to the needs and the world view of Māori as a treaty partner. So I'm not going to sit here and read you the strategy for the next 20 minutes, but I guess for me, it's just the points I want to make are the sort of 6 goals you can see in the middle there. Oh, no, not that. Mana taurite equity, so they are two sides of the same coin, but they force our organisation to think about how we build capability of our people to deliver on the aspirations of Māori. Ringa atawhai and guardianship. So ringa atawhai means to be careful with, I guess in some ways, the future. That is about our role as guardians of a beloved scheme in New Zealand. And in Te Ao Māori, we think very intergenerationally. So each generation is thinking about leaving the planet, their culture in a better state than when they, when they arrived. And so the same applies to our scheme, and we have to think about our investments in that way, and so even our investments and our actuaries are going to have to think about the capabilities they need to deliver on this strategy. And finally, oranga whānau is the well-being of families, safe and resilient communities. These are great words on a page, right? But actually the capability required to deliver on these and the capability shift within ACC for all 4,500 of our people is massive. New Zealand's education system has failed us miserably, so most of us grew up not learning the history of our country. And so by the very virtue of that, the vast majority of our staff will have unconscious bias, will not necessarily be able to understand and respond to the needs of our whānau Māori, our Māori clients, who, by the way, don't think of themselves as individuals, because in Te Ao Māori you exist in a whānau, an iwi, a hapu, and an iwi, or a community. So you don't think of yourself as a claim, ever. So there's huge capability shifts required for us. This strategy is 2 months old, so we've got a bit of work ahead of ourselves. I've got quite a few of us here actually from ACC with me, including one of our very new people and culture leaders. And this is an ongoing and massive piece of work for us at ACC, is how do we bring our people on this journey with us to deliver far better outcomes for Māori, for other underserved communities under the equity lens within the next 10 years. And, I'm hopeful that we can come back in five years and give you a progress report on that. This is a pretty bold and ambitious strategy. It scares the bejesus out of me, to be honest, because it requires quite a bit of change. But we have a karakia, a prayer, or a prayer, I guess, that we say at the beginning and the end of all of our hui, our meetings at ACC, and you can see it there. Oh, you can't now, it's gone, but so like I'm getting the message, they are outlined there in our guiding principles, and that is, whaia te tika, whaia te pono, whaia te aroha, mo te oranga tangata kia puta ki te whaiau ki te ao marama haumia hui e tāiki e. And that is about doing striving to do what is right, striving to act justly, and improving lives every day. And it's easy to say those words in a prayer every day. It's quite a big shift to understand what they mean and what they mean to the people we serve, and that is the challenge for us around our own capability, which is not denying that all of the things that you've all talked about are equally important to us, but this is our big shift and our big organisational focus. This is our North Star. So happy to talk about it in the break if anyone wants to know anything more, rather than go on too much more now. Thank you.
Such an interesting lens on that, and I'm sure we'd be happy to have you back in 5 years' time, Amanda, so we can hear about the execution of your strategy. I guess an open question, just on the topic of cultural capability, open question for all of our panellists. Does anyone want to talk about any aspects of your organisations or your thoughts around cultural capability, and if that's been considered and thought through within your businesses?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. Cultures, I call it like, you can feel it, and when you walk into a room, you really feel the culture. When you enter a business, you feel the culture of that. And I think it's the foundation of what we do, and it's how we do it. So for me, in particular, at Allianz, it's that sense of belonging is really important, and that's what we're creating. And I'm really proud to say we're seeing, in particular in personal injury, not that I'm competitive with my peers across the other divisions, I might say, but particular I'm really proud to say, Julie and the leadership team, we're achieving the enterprise leading culture and engagement results for Allianz, and I call that out for all the Allianz people in the room, so well done. But I think everyone has a role to play in culture. It's every team member has a role to play, and the leader has a role to play in culture. And for me, that sense of belonging is also looking at, from a capability point of view, what's in it for me? What's the value? That value, I like it like it's like a marriage. You have to have the same values to have a successful journey with an employer. But the culture is the foundation of why people come to work and how they feel. And I'm really proud to say we're doing lots of work and great work under the culture transformation at Allianz. We're 3 years into that journey, and we're seeing a shift, and retention has dropped dramatically. Similar to you, Jayne, we've seen our retention drop, and that's not just because the shift in what we're calling a staycation from anyone in the room that's human resources background. We're seeing a staycation now for our employees that are staying with businesses. But equally so, the demand for talent across personal injury as an industry, it's about ensuring that our people come to work and they're having fun, they're engaged, they're working together, they're growing their career, and we're seeing a real shift in career development is one of the key things that we're offering at Allianz. And I'm really pleased to say in our personal injury, our case manager career framework that we launched just over a year ago has made a dramatic difference in building our capability, but our people seeing a career journey in personal injury and where that can take them. So that's really exciting.
Thank you. Well, we've only got around 13 minutes left, so I'm going to turn to some questions from the audience. So who's going to be brave to answer this one here? Thank you. This is from Laurent. Does the panel see a futuristic capability might be providing case management via a virtual platform? We heard yesterday 45% of Gen Z feel they are more authentic virtually. Who wants to give that one a go?
Wow, I'll have a go at that one. It is really, really interesting, because if I think about the work we try to do to really understand an injured worker, their employment, their medical condition, their family circumstances, and it's really hard to do face-to-face. It's harder to do over the phone. We found in COVID it's harder to do. Telehealth doesn't seem to give us as good results as face-to-face. And when I talk to members of the medical fraternity, I think that the consensus is you get a whole lot of clues when you're with someone. So I really, really worry about people being comfortable in some kind of virtual metaverse universe where they get to choose to present themselves as they want to be seen. Yet our challenge is to deal with the people as they actually are. And so that when I kind of looked at that yesterday, I thought, oh, gee, Rog, if we're doing business in the metaverse, I'm going to buy a back block and I'm going to go make moonshine for a living, because that'll be, it's tangible. I can learn how to do that on the computer. But once we're trying to understand people's personalities and they're behind not just a screen, but they're behind a virtual presentation, I don't know how we're going to do that.
Does anyone else want to give that question a go?
I agree, Roger. I just think that the data and intelligence, and as we're entering this new revolution, I think it's about taking away the mundane tasks that create capacity, Jayne, and you mentioned that earlier. And talking with our people at Allianz, it is creating capacity and using the data intelligence and what platforms we're going to invest in to take away those mundane tasks. But I don't think you can ever replace the human-centric people-to-people interaction and placing people at the heart of what we do as an industry. And that is then investing, fueling for growth, those efficiencies we're seeing coming out by taking away the mundane tasks, and then investing that into growing the emotional intelligence, their resilience, to have those conversations, to get our return people back to work earlier, to manage their claims and be with them on that journey. I don't think you can replace that, Roger. I totally agree. I think we still need an element of that human-centred, and I think that's only going to elevate as we see greater psychological claims come through with physical.
And I guess my response, if little to add, is I have no idea if it could, but I think that's where we need to be building the capability that's been called out in that future thinking. As much as right now our focus, well, from Return to WorkSafe and the piece that we've been working on with EML and Gallagher Bassett has been on those frontline roles, that future thinking role is making sure we've got that digital literacy growing. We've got people exploring that space and bringing the rest of us along. That, I think, is the next exciting step that we can't lose sight of when we start talking about capability building.
And look, I agree with those comments. I add my 2 cents for what it's worth. I think, we need to meet the needs of an individual. And I think there will be a point in time in the future that the individual needs, there will be some people that want to interact with us that way. And they're probably those individuals that need really low touch, low support. They're probably medical expense only claims. And they want to deal with an avatar. And they want to say, here's my receipts, thanks very much, reimburse my claim. So I absolutely agree with all the comments in terms of, the capability and the skill that we have with humans. But I do think that somewhere in the future, and it's probably not that far away, there's going to be an opportunity for organisations to think about that space as well. The questions are flowing in now. The next question, do any of the panel members partner with their service providers to help develop broader staff capabilities? Are there opportunities which have yet to be explored or leveraged? So with their service providers, so I'm thinking that that's allied health, other service providers as well. Does anyone partner to leverage the capabilities and the skills of that industry?
I think for me, I look at how the partnerships we have here at Allianz, and I think in particular it's forming those really strategic partnerships within educational facilities. PIEF do a wonderful job, and I'm working with Mark on something really exciting. But for me, it's really how can we partner better with educational facilities, institutions that are going to help build capability. That's through internships, graduate programs, linking into the allied health professions. That's key to attracting talent in what we do. But also too, I think, looking into those institutions, educational institutions, and seeing what is the shift of what people are looking for, in particular, from a skills perspective, and how can we actually modify how we deliver some of that, that training or upskilling in the changing diverse that we're seeing, and the generational. I think we'll look at the generations that are coming through now as well, and in particular how we upskilling those, partnering with institutions that can help do that.
I guess I could give you a different example of that. So I talked about the need to build cultural capability. So some of our partnerships are with communities who I think over time will increasingly potentially become delivery partners for an organisation like ACC. And so last week we took 40 of our senior leaders from the service delivery team to Hamilton in New Zealand, and through partnership with iwi, with the local people there. We spent a night, so we slept on the marae overnight. We went out on a waka, so 40 people with varying skills at paddling waka was interesting on the Waikato River. But what that gave those that participated was a sense of the kind of lived reality of these families who are key clients and users of our service. And so it was in some ways I described it as a sort of soft learning opportunity, but it wasn't until we had feedback during the evening from everyone who had participated that actually it was quite a big shift happening for everyone in that room as a result of being on a waka, understanding the roles that people play when they're paddling together, the ability to link up and think and act as a group of waka, lots of analogies with our strategy, I guess. But also to see a very small, much maligned part of New Zealand community, a community called Huntly, show us in spades their resilience, the way that they work together and look out for one another, and how they want to interact with government agencies like ourselves. So a really great way to learn just from the lived reality of the people we serve.
Yeah, and I'd like to add on that, and I'm not young, I'm still young, aren't I? I could say that I'm still young. I'm still young. But I'm a proud Aboriginal woman, and for me it was really important at Allianz, and I'm so proud to say this, working in those vulnerable communities, to me, it's personal, but it's making a difference in those communities. And we've partnered with Clontarf, and Mark at Allianz, thank you, in help leading and driving that diversity and inclusion initiative. And supporting with the return to work specialists in those vulnerable communities, in particular setting up with Clontarf, how can we make a difference with young Indigenous men coming through and through co-education, coming into our office, working, and some super exciting stuff. It's going to be in the pipeline, working in the Indigenous communities coming through at Allianz. But I totally agree, immersing ourselves into the vulnerable communities in which we're supporting and representing is key, and it builds a different mindset for our people, a deep understanding, and that's crucial.
Thank you. We're going to have to wrap. There's so many more questions, but I hope everyone's staying around for the next break, so please feel free to go and ask your question if I didn't get an opportunity to ask it today. I just want to take a moment to express my thanks and valuable contributions today from the panel. So round of applause for our panel.